Welcome back to our final session this afternoon. We hope that your discussion was fruitful and that you have some questions ready for our experts. That being said, we are going to go through our same rotation like we did earlier today, and we're going to start off with St. James, and Laurel Bartholomew is going to give us that first question. So, Laurel, let me get you set up. There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So we had a very full discussion here at St. James School. Lots of questions we had, but the one that we're going to present to you is, how do you ignore sexuality but accept diversity and cultural differences at the same time? And this came up as an example that occurred in one of our sixth grade classes at St. James. A teacher handed out rainbow stickers for recognition of good performance on an activity. And another sixth grade student has said to the teacher, wait, does this mean you support gay pride? And got the kids started on a discussion on that. And I don't know, so that's our question. How do you handle that? You want to read the question?
Okay. Can you rephrase it? I'm not sure I understand. It sounded like you said ignore sexuality, but I didn't understand that part. Could you say your question again?
Sure. How do you ignore sexuality but accept diversity and cultural differences at the same time?
I just don't understand. Go ahead.
Normally Don will answer first. One of the things I think our students need to hear is about their uniqueness, first of all. And I think it was a point that Don was saying very clearly, this idea that each person is an unrepeatable who. And I think a lot of the quest we see going on for identity is a sort of groping and grasping for that truth. And Christianity exalts that to the ultimate point that there is nobody like you in the entire creation. You know, you are a unique person, and God cannot replace you and will not replace you in any way. And from that, there are many gatherings, if you like, of who's in different cultures, in different ages, and in different diverse groups. And that is all part of the way in which we do associate with one another, and they're real human gatherings in different ways. Our sexuality is part of the nature God has given us, manifested in the body. And so that's on a different level than that of cultural difference and the language group we use and so on. I don't know if that was the way in which you were trying to get at the question. Yeah. So please.
Maybe I can. Okay. I can understand. I'll answer as best I understood the question. It seemed maybe you were suggesting that, for example, there could be a subculture. Sometimes, for example, the gay culture is called a subculture or something like that. And it seemed like the question was how can that not get cultural legitimacy or cultural acceptance if cultural diversity is accepted in the church? So if that was the question, I would answer it this way. There's a great teaching from St. John Paul II on culture in his encyclical Veritatis Splendor, the Splendor of the Truth. And it's similar to what Petrarch was saying, that we have a universal humanity and also a truth of the dignity of the human person. So what I am and who I am, there are some objective truths about that. And that all culture does have to be measured by whether it aligns with that truth. And so culture is always in some way, of human origin, whereas our human personhood is of divine origin. And this is what we've been talking about today, being created. So it's something similar to what I said in the earlier session. We always have to ask, is the identity, in this case, it might be a cultural identity, is the identity a development of, a furthering of, a realization of my God-given identity? And so some cultural identities would not be that, and therefore, if you like, not be true culture or acceptable culture. So he used the phrase often, the evangelization of culture, because there are good culture and bad culture. And so the acceptance of cultural diversity in Catholicism is never granting, some kind of sanction to all culture or equality to all culture, but in fact does evaluate culture. Now, we know he famously called out the culture of death as opposed to the culture of life. But that's only one example of the culture of death as an example of how a culture can go askew and degrade the human person, and therefore it cannot be accepted as legitimate culture. So you wouldn't have something similar, the culture of death could be something like a pro-abortion movement. It's not acceptable to celebrate or promote that in a Catholic institution. But even something like sex trafficking, he pointed out, is a sign of the culture of death. And we wouldn't say that that's just some kind of cultural opinion, that some people think sex work and sex trafficking are the same thing and all humans are a commodity and that's just their cultural opinion. We are able to critique and in some ways resist certain cultures as degrading of the truth of the human person as created in the image and likeness of God. So that could happen with gay culture if it became something like that, a promotion, in fact, of falsehoods about the human person. It doesn't retain legitimacy of culture at that level.
Can I just add one more point here? Only because I think, I'm beginning, and again, this may all be just missing the point of what you're asking, but it seems to me we're in a huge debate at the moment about globalism and individual cultures. So everybody's kind of aware of, where do we stand on this and where does the church stand? And the Directory for Catechesis has a lot of interesting things to say about this, because on the one hand, globalism at the moment is being pushed by certain liberal ideologies. And so the church is wanting to resist that. On the other hand, she doesn't say that we should simply go for a position that all cultures, traditions, and customs in every place are simply valid and should be accepted. So she doesn't oppose the globalist point of view with, if you like, saying all the merits are all in that local custom approach. Rather, both have got to be judged according to the universal truths of the person and of the person especially, and ultimately of God's revelation. And I think that puts us all in an interesting place at the moment, socially and politically, where the debates fly back and forth, but often that perspective the church has of the universal truth of the person is not the guiding light of either. Anyway.
Thank you very much. And we will move on to our next question. And that's going to be from Trinity Catholic, and Mary Ann's going to speak.
Hey, thank you, Karen. We too had several questions, really good questions, so it was hard to pick one that I can bring to the group. And this particular question has like a situation described first, and then the question is following it. It says, in older grades, how do we handle a situation where a student may confide that they have feelings for the same-sex friend? So give an example of an answer that is condoning and encouraging or assisting.
Not condoning. Not condoning.
Not condoning. Oh, sorry. Oh, not. How did I miss the not? Sorry. Give an example of an answer that is not condoning, encouraging, or assisting. Thank you.
One of the things that we would do here at the university, and we've encouraged all personnel to do, professors, student life in scenarios like this, is to start with asking questions, because a point has been made or a statement has been made, and you don't want to jump in at that level and say, well, this is what I think, or this is what we need to say. So asking questions, in this case, it might be, why would you say you feel that way, or what makes you describe yourself as feeling that way? When did it start, or what, how do you experience it? And you really want to dialogue with the person. Comes back a lot to what we said about making sure the person knows that you care, or else they're not going to care what you know. So you have to really create that contact of interest and compassion and things like this. And you should pick up on clues if they are asking, by bringing this up, for some help with it. Maybe, this is what we would most likely see here at the university. They're not comfortable with it, or want to know maybe how to deal with it in a healthy way, meaning they don't feel like it would be healthy to act on it or fully embrace it or something. And that gives you the avenue in, once you understand maybe how this person feels about their own feelings. So, asking questions certainly avoids condoning and encouraging and assisting. But then if it comes down to the saying, so if the person were to ask point blank, what do you think I should do, or how do you think about what I'm saying here? We would go back, these sorts of feelings can happen to lots of people in different ways. So there's nothing too terribly alarming about it. But at the same time, they could never really lead you down a path of fulfillment and the meaning of your own sexuality, and age appropriate way to put that into terms. And so speak definitely about the feelings, not matching the person. This is very clear in the teachings of the church, for example, on same-sex attraction. The feelings are disordered, not the person. There's not something wrong with the person who has the feelings, that this is what maybe a secular thing would say, the person is gay or the person is homosexual. No, the feelings are, but the person is not. And so helping reaffirming the truth of that individual's body, helping them affirm that truth. I affirm the maleness in you or femaleness in you, which is not ordered to same-sex relationships, but really saying that, these feelings don't match the fullness of who you are in your sexuality, and I don't see them leading to your personal fulfillment and even your sexual fulfillment and things like that. So really keeping the concentration on the same-sex feelings or attraction, and talking about those as incongruent with the truth of the person, rather than in some way focusing on the person as if something's wrong with him or her.
I don't have much to add to that. I didn't know whether this was a kind of a classroom situation, or a situation where an individual approached you. And obviously, the more one can have a situation where it becomes an individual conversation, the more opportunities there are to really listen and allow that questioning to come out. And that's the preferable thing. Obviously, in a classroom, we're always making sure that certain points are kind of reaffirmed without there being any sense at all of the condemnation of a person who's raised a problematic issue. And clearly, there can be sometimes an invitation to have a conversation outside of the classroom, which is what we would do with a lot of situations here, where somebody raises something which you feel, in order for this not to get personal about them, because one doesn't want that to be a conversation but at a personal level in front of the whole class, you try and place that in another context. And then very much what Don says, I mean, the main gift God gives us is, first of all, to listen, and secondly, to ask some questions and to let them sense empathy, first of all. Yeah. So that, and then if invited to give a view, they're more open to hearing what we want to say.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next question, and that's going to come from Dan out at IHC. Let me bring him up on the screen. There you are. Oh, let's see. Sorry. Okay.
Yep. Hello. Okay, yep, you can see me. So in reviewing the questions from the faculty, a lot of them were regarding our role as Catholic educators and in giving supports to our students. So how would we help our students to value themselves as a who and not a what? And in some of the other ones, they were talking about, giving our kids those tools at age appropriateness as they're going through. So obviously, high school is going to be much different than an elementary. So at what levels should we be bringing these supports in for our students to help them learn this truth as they're moving up through our system?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm going to share with you, just to remind you, I'm trying to share with you what I think comes from my theological expertise, but always what I can say is in the teachings of the church. So I want to be careful to remind you of that. And one of the things the teachings of the church talk about with educators, and even apart from sexual education, but it may be even more so there, is we are in some ways, partners secondary to the parents. And having a good rapport with parents at the younger age is probably, even more important at the older ages. So having parental input, parental approval, or whatever for anything that might seem sensitive or anything like that is always key. And understanding that the parents are the primary educators of the children. That's very clear in Catholic education, Catholic teaching. But our role is, as you said, to introduce even early on the dignity of the body and the truth of the body, and then it grows incrementally. And with puberty, obviously, then the sexuality of the body is where it comes in. Once you have puberty, that's when it is time to introduce more clearly the sexuality of the body. Not that there isn't mention of being boys and girls prior to that, but certainly sensitive again to the parental role. You would not want to rush ahead with any of the what we call sex education prior to puberty and things like that. But really, one of the things that I think, to really treat everyone in terms of, their value as in terms of who they are, this can be difficult in achievement, environments like a school sometimes, and where the bodies that perform better, maybe on the sports field, get the awards and letters and things like that. That's something you have to think about balancing. Certainly praising people for their character is a large part of that, and who they are in their character. So things like sportsmanship, for example, is a way to counterbalance maybe who was the fastest runner, or who had the best attitude, could maybe be equally emphasized or acknowledged at an award ceremony or something like that. And really getting to that spiritual depth is when you get people to think about who they are in themselves and in their interior life, as opposed to what's true and what's true about their bodies, for example. But, a healthy respect for the body that's linked with a healthy respect for the person too. And we teach that at a very young age, to respect people's personal space and privacy, and to in that include how the body isn't something, but really who this person is, and how who this person is present through that body. This is key. And really to avoid educational approaches to the body that do treat it as a what, I think is key. I've seen this even in my own children's lives, just various material, the body is a machine you ride around in and things like this. And they thought this was a good way to educate about the body. But this is totally the opposite of what we said. It's someone present. And so emphasizing that in interpersonal interactions is good, but also how we acknowledge it's the cult of the body, what the church would call it, when we think humans are superior if they have superior bodies, and we think their bodies are superior because of what they can do or what can be gotten from them. This is what we have to avoid in the educational environment. So I do think focusing on spiritual qualities, character, and things like that can help people keep focus on who someone is, apart from what they might be able to physically or materially accomplish. Is definitely part of part of the solution to the problem here.
Yeah. Just following on what Don says, the document I found most helpful from the church personally is about sex education in the home. and it's called The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality by the Pontifical Council for the Family.
Yeah.
That actually goes through the different age levels and says the approach really that should be taken at each age, and gives very practical advice, I thought, and has got an absolutely wonderful, very short presentation on the church's teaching on human sexuality, which is really readable and I think can be used with parents very easily. So that would just be one thing I would really recommend if you haven't come across it, though you probably have, I suspect. But that could really be very useful for you.
Thank you. Would you repeat that again, the title?
Yes, it's called The Truth and Meaning of Human Sexuality.
Thank
Right
you.
here on my
Look,
desk.
have you
You're
got
on
it?
the right track.
Oh, it's on your desk. Oh, wonderful.
I
Okay.
don't want to mention too many documents. Though,
No,
but
no,
that's a very good
find
one.
that
It's a very good one.
yeah, it's very readable. It's really, and it's for parents and families.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much. Let's move on to our next question, and that's going to be from Augustinian, and it's going to be Sister Sue Ann.
Hello. We had a couple along the same line about how to encourage connections when the disagreements have caused people not to want to connect at all, or the disagreements have caused them pain, or they withdraw and become aggressive. How do you encourage connections along those lines?
You mean that people disagree with the church's teaching on human sexuality?
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I do think it's something similar to what I said in the session this morning, that to not only show, the person that you care about them and that these issues and disagreements are one part of a much larger relationship, and to reaffirm that relationship on other levels. But again, really to encourage people to, again, think about that all we're asking is that they see and acknowledge what we believe about the human person and the vision of the human person that we have. And that the issues of the sexuality or the teachings on sexuality are only one expression of that, and invite them to see the other expressions of it. And to see that it's not as maybe confrontational, accusatory, or anything like that it may come across in the first place. Because I assume that's basically where the hurt is coming, that it's coming across as somehow accusatory or condemning, which it's not. Again, it's a vision of the person that's very positive, very, very magnificent. John Paul II loves to use the phrase stupendous. It's stupendous, amazing. And I'm saying that about you, and whoever you are in my class or in my institution, I'm saying you have this body, you have this sexuality, you have this person, and I'm only affirming you every step of the way. I may be calling you out, as I described it this morning, that some of your thoughts and desires, and maybe even your actions, don't match up with how awesome you really are. But in no way am I attacking you. And I'm inviting you to see all the positive things I am saying about you, and all the positive things I'm doing for you. And, maybe we have to shift focus and maybe talk about some other moral things. Like, I would be very much against someone being violent to you and not respecting your dignity in that way. And it's because I so much care about you. And I'm trying to uphold the same dignity when I talk about the sexual issues, or lying to you and defrauding you and harming you in that way. I'm trying to uphold your dignity across the board. I would talk about how the social teachings promote the sense of equality and solidarity among all humans, and avoid racism and all kinds of discrimination, and just how respectful it really is in all situations. And really encourage the person to see that respect, that affirmation, that dignity is what we're trying to say, even in some of the things that are perhaps coming across hurtful. But then there is a level where we can express that, of course, we can be hurt by some things when the teachings are rejected. If someone says something about marriage, they're talking about my wife's marriage. And, that I could encourage them to see that I'm not trying to take offense at what they're saying and not personalize it, but listen and think about things objectively, and encourage them to say, look, if I want you to express yourself and not be so offended, then you should hear as well, without necessarily taking it as so offensive or personally accusatory.
I think just following what Dr. Ashley says, one of the things we really are coping with, isn't it, is the way in which people don't necessarily have a kind of joined up thinking. So I really like that response that you try to show how, look, in all these other areas, this is what the principles mean, and this is just one of those. And so you try and show. This is the amazing thing about the Catholic faith. It is such a unified, coherent whole, and that is why it's so beautiful. The other thing, I know it's sometimes trying to make sure that we don't give away the truth. We kind of will go in and make sure we say something opposite to what somebody says, because, we're trying to make sure, okay, everybody must know that's wrong. And I think we have to make all the judgments prudentially in the situation where we need to go on this. Oh, really? I really liked the approach of Thomas Aquinas, where he said that in every error there is some truth. And one of the good ways to approach somebody who's holding something which is an error is to begin by affirming the truth they're holding to. And then he said, then distinguish it from the fuller truth. So you affirm what you can as a connection point. And then, so he always begins all his treatments with the opposite of so all the objections to his own point. And then he says, okay, there's truth in that in this sense, and now I want to make a distinction. That can sometimes be a good way to discuss things, because it means the person is not feeling you've just contradicted them, but you've affirmed something with them, and then you've made a distinction which maybe it's not as difficult for them to think, okay, that's an interesting distinction you're trying to introduce here for me. So that's just another thought.
Yeah, and with that, definitely distinguish the teachings on sexual identity and orientation. They really do. If there's anything negative, it's that certain feelings and actions are not in line with our true dignity. And it's never critical of any person, but only certain thoughts and desires, feelings. And so if the person is hearing a personal attack in criticism of same-sex attraction, for example, or the teaching on same-sex attraction, then that is them over-identifying with their feelings and their attraction, because they're taking it as a personal attack, when it's in fact meant specifically to distinguish those feelings from their personhood and who they truly are as the image of God, as this man or this woman. So helping me to see that could also be very important, that distinction.
Thank you. Let's move on to our next question. And this time we're going to be going out to Plattsburgh to Seton Catholic, and Mary is going to give us the question.
Good afternoon. If we happen to have a student going through identity dysphoria, what approach should we take to help this student navigate through this issue?
Yeah, well, this is where we found in the work I've done with the Ohio bishops and here at the university, having a unified policy so that everyone in the institution is interacting with this person in the same way is key. And I don't know what your situations are at your schools, if you have those policies written or formulated or not. What I would share with you is, and you could look this up on the internet, I made sure before I mentioned this today, you can Google the Diocese of Cleveland policies on gender identity issues in their schools. And it's short, it's just 3 pages. It's very clear, very, very concise. And it's a blend of this, again, never condoning and encouraging and assisting, but always being available and pastorally caring for that person, respecting that person, welcoming that person. But then drawing the line saying, but this won't be possible here at the school, such as the use of preferred pronouns, such as use of facilities that don't correspond to your true sexuality, and on and on and on. So then the policies let the individual know it's not you we're rejecting in any way, and we understand that you are authentically expressing a struggle with us. You're saying this is what I'm experiencing. We're acknowledging that. We're available to help in any way we can. But in this community setting, we're not going to be able to allow certain activities or expressions that would be contrary to your dignity, but also contrary to the well-being of the others in the community. And there's always a clause in all these policies that, you really you want to hold the policies, but not in some absolute nature. It's always with a pastoral exception that could be coordinated here or there. Now, some policies that's not possible for maybe, for example, using the bathroom facilities, but maybe making alternative arrangements or something like that is what some schools do. But making sure you tell this individual they're respected, welcomed, their struggle is acknowledged, any help that can be provided would be provided. Mainly in a Catholic institution, it's pastoral care. We offer psychological counseling here at the university because we have a clinical counseling center. So we would offer that. But drawing the line at allowing certain activities or practices by this individual that are in fact contrary to the truth of their sexual identity. So again, there's nothing wrong with you. There's something amiss about these feelings and experiences you're having. And we won't let you, we won't enable you to act on those feelings and experiences. That won't solve the problem or somehow negate the problem. It might only aggravate it. This is the key.
Thanks. I don't think I have anything to add on that one. Thanks.
Thank you. We will move on to our next question. And this question comes from Andrea out at St. Bernard's in Saranac Lake. And here we go.
Hi. Dr. Wiley mentioned the packet that we could give to families who were struggling with decisions. Do you have any recommendations on picture books or materials aimed at elementary age students that would help them understand our beliefs better?
We talked about this during one of the breaks. I'm hesitant to publicly endorse certain books or authors and things. And that's just from experience, but also different reasons. I can't absolutely vet everyone. There's lots of good things out there. But having thought further about it, I will say this: for Catholic schools, Sophia Institute Press has very good material for teachers in teaching the theology of the body. I have worked with them. I've done teacher seminars with them. And I didn't do that unless I reviewed the materials that they would offer to teachers. And they do have good literature out there, and it's age appropriate. They're all teachers themselves who've now gone into this side of the profession, so they know exactly what you need in the classroom and at what ages and things like that. So the Theology of the Body series and material from Sophia Institute Press, I think, is very good. And then in a less knowledgeable way, but still a very good opinion of, there are curriculums that again are age appropriate from Rua Woods out of Cincinnati. It's just RUAH Woods. And it's a Catholic curriculum on the theology of the body for schools. And they make their resources available to teachers through their website and everything like that. There is a lot of good things out there on the theology of the body, and also on any pastoral care of struggling individuals. I try to keep the focus on the official teachings of the church. I can recommend those without any hesitation. Those are pre-vetted for me. But I do feel comfortable mentioning Sophia Institute Press's material and Rua Woods' curriculum.
And Andrea, I don't know whether you and the folks at St. Bernard have come across on Franciscan at Home. there's a very good workshop teaching your children about sexuality by Gerard O'Shea. And in that workshop, I'm pretty certain it links to a very good resource which he produced, which I think is very, very fine as well. And that's especially good for grade school and middle school sort of ages. So I don't know if you come across that workshop, but have a look at that, see what you think of it.
Thank you. Let's move on to our next question. And this one will be from, I guess Dan will be on behalf of Amy and out at IHC.
So many of the questions that the faculty had asked, questions have already been asked and answered. But one thing that we hadn't talked about yet is the current synod happening right now. Are you able to talk about any of the issues that the church is wrestling with and discussing, and kind of like where do you see where's the church leaning towards? I know that there's nothing been pushed out yet, and it won't be for some time. But can you speak to anything going on with the current synod?
I'll let you handle that one, Petra.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
I'll tell you something I think is helpful. Do you know, I found this in this is Evangelii Gaudium by Pope Francis, only because we're getting a lot of Pope Francis' big focus is what he calls pastoral accompaniment. Seems to be his major interest. This is from this work. It's paragraph 170, and I just want to give you this because because we have to remember that on the whole, things which come to us are mediated through the press, who already have a desire to say that the church, for example, is changing her teaching or, wants to do something completely different. And I think the church, I've always thought the church finds it very, very hard to manage media. Doesn't quite know how to do that well. I mean, John Paul obviously decided he'd get out on the world stage, but on the whole, the church has difficulty with a very secular media. But this is Pope Francis. He says, although it sounds obvious, spiritual accompaniments must lead others ever closer to God, in whom we attain true freedom. Some people think they're free if they can avoid God. They fail to see that they remained existentially orphaned, helpless, homeless. They cease being pilgrims and become drifters, flitting around themselves and never getting anywhere. To accompany them would be counterproductive if it became a sort of therapy, supporting self-absorption, and cease to be a pilgrimage with Christ to the Father. Now that's his way of wanting to remind us when we say accompaniment. So I think one of the things Pope Francis, this is how I would interpret what's going on. This is a Holy Father who's spoken more about spiritual warfare than any other pope for over 100 years. And he's described the church as being like a field hospital, which, as you know, is a place which is out in the battlefield trying to pick up the wounded. I think his own perception of and his own reading of the signs of the times are that we are in a massive war, and that the church must try to reach everybody it can. For that reason, he's signaling at all times a kind of we are with you and for you, not against you, because he's very aware that people have already made up their mind about the church and find it very difficult to be open to hearing anything she has to say. So he's profiling a sort of very welcoming openness, but he's relying upon us, educators, people in ministry, families and so on, to be able to pick up those who are thereby attracted and want to give the church another chance, and bring them in in this way through paths of safety of the sort that Dr. Ash has been describing, with a lot of clarity, but never abandoning people as they move. So we never make any movements against the person. We only assist them on the way, but we don't follow them into the wilderness. We are good guides if we maintain our direction and assist them in that. And I think that's what he wants. I do think the synod is a very, very confusing time, because it's very hard to control what's going on there.
Yeah.
Definitely the church is not changing her teaching on anything. And the church and Pope Francis is completely committed to the fullness of Christian doctrine. But he's trying to see whether pastoral approaches which can welcome people in, how we can make those work in these difficult times. And I think it's going to require the wisdom and skills of us all to do that well and not to be misunderstood in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think I don't know what's going to happen. I hope, there's always an unpredictable element. But I think if you overread this synod and synodality in terms of a very institutional political mindset, it's the idea of, well, maybe the Pope's renouncing his authority or something, but I don't see it that way at all. I understood it in Petrock's terms that this is a pastoral program and a pastoral concern. And again, we're back to what we said a couple of times today. People won't care what you know until they know that you care. And they don't feel cared about if you don't listen to them at all. And that's what I heard him saying, is we need to listen and have people be able to give input, not people be able to define doctrines or something like that, which is not what I understand it to be, but to pastorally care for people. They will listen to us when they know we care, and they will get the impression we care if we take time to listen. And that seems to be giving the idea of the synod, giving people more input in the life of the church, is giving them a sense of feeling cared for. That's probably the best way to look at it, but that's the way I'm going to look at it.
We've got another year of this because we've got Synod Part 2.
Yeah.
October. So it's going to be a year of a lot of confusion, I think.
We'll look forward to your clarity going forward. And with that, I'd like to end with our final question, if I can, and that would be from our friends out at St. Agnes in Lake Placid. And I don't see a camera on there. So if you have you might unmute. Oh, there you are. I'm sorry, I've done the wrong thing. Apologize. Here we go.
That's okay. We're here.
We're in. Go ahead.
So our questions were very similar to many of those still asked, but we were just wondering, maybe, in final thoughts, how would you say we can, as educators, instill a secure, positive, and stable sense of self as God designed?
How do we instill that in our students, is what you're asking, yeah? I mean, again, I'm going to answer with John Paul II, although I might have my own personal experiences, but he talks about the need for love and how that gives comprehension and meaning and sensibility to everyone's existence. This is in his encyclical, The Redeemer of Man, that man's existence is incomprehensible and very fragile and unstable without love. And in educating, it needs to be out of love and really out of care, and to pray about what it is I'm going to be in these people's lives, and how am I going to be that source of care. And I think that's, what instills the sense of value and well-being and confidence in everything else in any human, is knowing they're loved. Now, we've talked about, I've mentioned earlier today, that knowing they're loved by God would be the key, but we can be the ambassadors and the prophets and message of that. But it's very doubtful in people's mind that God loves them if we don't love them. It could be a contradictory message. So our own attitudes, our own peace in dealing with our students, being loving towards them, even if we have to maybe be, strict on some things is the key. I mean, you can see it's going to parallel a lot of good parenting as well, but reassuring them that what you're doing is out of love and care for them. And this is a bit of a different scenario, but I wanted to mention this. You know, my wife volunteered in a charity downtown, and lots of children in need would go to these after school programs, and she taught them a cooking class, and they call it Mama Ashley's cooking class. And we knew most of them were going there precisely because they were hungry. They were really in need of food. And she would teach them to cook, and it was kind of crazy, of course, with all these children and everything else. And she would feed them, but the main thing they knew going out of there is that this woman, who maybe had other things that she could be spending her time and energy on, took those afternoons to go down there and teach them cooking, because she thought they were worth her time and energy, worth the sacrifices of what else she could be doing. And she couldn't solve all their problems. They lived in poverty, very unstable homes, and really had a lot of social issues and personal issues. But they always left Mama Ashley's cooking class knowing that Mama Ashley cared about them. And what she tried to teach them about cooking and nutrition and everything else was just sort of the tip of the iceberg about trying to affirm that they were important. So I think that's what I try to do too, instill in my teaching, that I'm doing this because I think you're important. And that's really one of the things I'm teaching you to think about yourself, that you're important, you're meaningful, you're valuable in this world. And God sees you that way. God helps me to see you that way. And if you can see yourself that way, we've already got a big success here.
I could never improve on that. Fantastic.
Okay. Listen, I can't thank the presenters enough for what they've done for us today. I generally take notes and then highlight the elements that have been particularly meaningful to me. I have too many, so I'm not going to take the time to mention them. But Petrarch, you mentioned at the beginning that you hope that our partnership with Franciscan University, that this will be a step toward strengthening that partnership and giving us the impetus to move forward in new ways, so that we can reap the rich benefits of so many of the workshops that you offer. For us, this is a topic that has been very important. Principals come with questions about parents who approach them and wonder about welcoming a child who is struggling with their identity into our school, and what will that mean? We are aware that we have students whose parents are same-sex, and what does that mean in terms of the way in which we speak with them and speak with their parents? And up until this point, although we've given procedures to principals to follow, we thought it very important that those procedures be conducted in a conversation with the parents, rather than publishing them widely, but addressing the parents, because this gave us an opportunity to do exactly, I think, what Donald was saying, asking questions and meeting people where they're at. And at the same time, when all is said and done, there will be certain procedures that have to be in place, but the child is welcome. The child is welcome. And the parents knowing that the tenets of our Catholic faith will be alive and well in that school, which certainly means that we value each and every person and the worth of each and every person. So I think you've helped us. You've helped me. I hope you've helped the teachers and our principals as well. I feel like it's the tip of the iceberg in some ways, that there's much we have to take home and continue to think about, continue to pray about, continue to listen to our colleagues, and continue to implement in our schools. I want to thank our principals too. because these meetings were held in their schools, there was some organization and some planning that they had to undertake. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think everyone is probably very grateful that they don't have to travel 3 or 4 hours to get home. You're much closer to home than you would have been if we'd had this in person. So let me just close with a prayer and wish you all safe travels. Again, thank you. I think Petrarch and Dr. Ishis, I think we'll be in touch because we'd like to do a little follow-up in terms of your impressions of today and of ways in which we might be able to move forward.
And I just say before you say the prayer, sister, as well, so I'm sure on behalf of both of us, it's been such a privilege to be with you all. Just to hear the searching questions, and I feel it's really you've asked such real questions with such an attitude of faith, seeking how to move forward, and I think it's a new world for all of us trying to work out exactly what to do. I know that we would be delighted to do any follow-up as well. We would so appreciate hearing how it all goes as well. So any ways in which we can be of help in the future, do reach out, sister, and thank you. And please thank all your colleagues.
Thank you very much. And I have one word for the teachers. One of the comments that I heard today was that teachers are the most important resource in our schools. Teachers are the most important resource in our schools. Know that is what we think of you. Know that we appreciate the rich resource that you are for the children that are entrusted to our care. So God bless you. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good and gracious God, we are grateful for the opportunity to gather today to listen, discuss, and reflect upon the beauty and truth of the human person, created in your image and likeness. Do not let the learning and conversations we encounter today lie dormant. Rather, with your grace, may they continue to form our minds and our hearts so that we will acknowledge and rejoice in the mystery of every human person, and guide us so we can go forth to proclaim the gospel and address the challenges and questions about the truth of the human person. And in the words of St. Leo the Great, may we know our dignity and the dignity of our brothers and sisters who share in your life. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Good afternoon.